Day 13 of World War II arrived with a strange mix of routine and shock. By now, the world was beginning to understand that this was not a conflict that would burn out quickly. It was growing, spreading, and pulling entire nations into its gravity. What made this day especially unsettling was not one single dramatic event, but the accumulation of moments that revealed how fast the world was changing. On this day, military movements accelerated. Armies that had mobilized in haste were now settling into patterns of advance, defense, and occupation. What shocked many observers was how quickly borders became meaningless. Lines drawn on maps were crossed with little warning, and regions that had known peace for generations suddenly found themselves under foreign control. Civilians experienced some of the most disturbing realities of war on Day 13. Trains filled with refugees moved endlessly, carrying families who had left everything behind. Homes were abandoned, businesses shuttered, and entire communities emptied almost overnight. The shock was not just in the violence, but in how normal displacement was becoming. Governments issued confident statements, but behind closed doors panic was spreading. Intelligence reports arriving on Day 13 painted a darker picture than expected. Enemy strength had been underestimated. Defenses thought to be solid were already being tested. For many leaders, this was the day they realized that early assumptions had been dangerously optimistic. Soldiers on the front lines encountered a new kind of fear. The excitement of initial deployment was gone. In its place was exhaustion and uncertainty. Some units faced their first real combat on this day, and the shock of battle left lasting scars. The sound of artillery, the chaos of movement, and the sudden loss of comrades shattered any remaining illusions about glory. One of the most shocking aspects of Day 13 was how quickly technology began to dominate the battlefield. Aircraft ruled the skies, disrupting supply lines and spreading fear far beyond the front. Cities learned that distance no longer guaranteed safety. Even those far from fighting understood they were no longer beyond reach. At sea, naval tensions rose sharply. Convoys were rerouted, ports were placed on high alert, and sailors prepared for engagements that could decide control of vital trade routes. The realization that oceans were now battlefields shocked nations that had relied on naval power for security. Economically, Day 13 exposed how deeply war would reshape daily life. Factories were ordered to shift production entirely toward weapons and supplies. Workers were pushed into longer hours. Shortages began appearing in markets. What shocked civilians most was how quickly governments took control of resources, signaling that personal comfort would be sacrificed for survival. Morally, the war took a darker turn. Reports of harsh treatment in occupied areas began circulating, even if heavily censored. The idea that civilians could become targets, not accidents, unsettled the world. Day 13 marked the beginning of a slow, painful realization that the rules of previous wars were no longer being followed. Resistance also began quietly on this day. In homes, basements, and back rooms, people whispered about defiance. Small acts, refusing orders, hiding supplies, spreading information, carried enormous risk. The shocking truth was that ordinary citizens were already being forced to choose between safety and courage. Internationally, neutral nations grew uneasy. Diplomatic messages exchanged on Day 13 revealed fear that staying out of the war might be impossible. Economic pressure, political threats, and strategic necessity were closing in. The conflict was no longer distant. It was global. Propaganda intensified. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, and public speeches worked to shape how people understood the war. What shocked many was how quickly truth became flexible. Information was controlled, victories exaggerated, losses minimized. Reality itself became a weapon. By the end of day 13, the world was not celebrating or mourning a single event. Instead, it was absorbing a deeper shock. This war was transforming society at every level. It was changing how people lived, worked, trusted, and hoped. The speed of that transformation was terrifying. Looking back, historians see Day 13 as one of those moments when momentum became unstoppable. The war had taken on a life of its own. Decisions made under pressure, fears amplified by uncertainty, and actions driven by survival were setting paths that could no longer be reversed. What happened on Day 13 of World War II was shocking not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was revealing. It showed the world exactly what kind of war this would be, and how deeply it would scar the future.